Jesse James. The name alone conjures up images of a daring outlaw on horseback, robbing banks and trains with his notorious band of robbers. To some, he is a folk hero, a symbol of resistance against the rich and powerful. Others thought he was a cold-blooded killer, responsible for countless deaths. But who is Jesse James really? Is he a righteous rebel or an evil criminal? In this video, we dive into the life of one of America's most notorious figures and answer the question: Jesse James, folk hero or cold-blooded killer? Jesse James, the notorious outlaw, was born into a family from humble beginnings. His parents, Robert Sallee James and Zerelda Elizabeth Cole James, met at a revival meeting in Stamping Ground, Kentucky, and were married on December 28, 1841. Robert continued his education and graduated from Georgetown College before moving with his young family to Centerville in the area of Clay County, Missouri, which would later be known as Kearney. In Kearney, with the help of a neighbor, the James family built a log cabin in the wilderness and a large farm. Robert also became the pastor of a church called Little Baptist outside of Kearney. He was a loved and respected man in the community who played a key role in the founding of William Jewell College in Liberty, Missouri. Remember to hit the like button, because it helps us a lot. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell to not miss the upcoming interesting video. Jesse James is the third child of Robert and Zerelda James. He was born on September 5, 1847, on his family's farm. Unfortunately, their second son, Robert James Jr., died of illness just 33 days after birth. Despite the difficult beginnings, the James family was united and strong-willed. They have persevered through difficulties and worked tirelessly to build a better life for themselves. This upbringing later played an important role in shaping Jesse James' character and actions. In the early months of 1850, Pastor Robert James was invited to serve as chaplain on a wagon train of local people traveling west to California in search of gold. He left the farm for his wife Zerelda Elizabeth Cole James to care for the family and headed west with the intention of preaching to the crowds of gold miners gathered there. However, Robert James never returned to Missouri. On August 1, 1850, he developed a fever from drinking contaminated water. His condition worsened and on August 18, 1850, he died of cholera at the Placerville Gold Camp in California. Unfortunately, the people there built a grave for him but did not mark it. And years later, Jesse James set out to search for his father's resting place but failed. Zerelda Elizabeth Cole James was left to inherit the family farm and raise 3 young children alone. Frank James, the oldest son, was only 7 years old when his father died. His passing is a great loss to the family. Sometime later, Zerelda Elizabeth Cole James married a neighboring farmer named Benjamin Sims on September 10, 1852. Unfortunately, this marriage was fraught with turbulence due to Sims' treatment of his 2 eldest sons. He frequently used violence to teach them, even though Zerelda strongly objected. Despite many efforts, the couple's arguments kept happening. That led to Zerelda filing for divorce, an unusual move at the time. However, the divorce was never finalized because Sims died on January 2, 1854, in a horse accident. Zerelda's third marriage was to Dr. Archie Reuben Samuel in 1855. He was a rather passive and quiet man, so important decisions in the family are made by Zerelda. Zerelda's strong will and determination is evident in the way she runs the family, making all the decisions regarding the children. Under Dr. Samuel's guidance, the family bought more land and their fortune grew. The family even bought slaves to help manage the farm. During their teenage years, both Frank and Jesse James worked on the farm, enjoying a normal family life. Frank, the eldest, was a quiet, devout boy with an interest in his late father's vast library, especially the works of William Shakespeare. He is said to have expressed a desire to become a school teacher. In contrast, Jesse is known for his generosity, magnanimity, and assertiveness, often displaying mischief. Dr. Samuel taught both boys essential skills such as riding and shooting. In 1861, Frank James' plans to attend college were interrupted by the outbreak of the Civil War in Missouri. The state was divided on the issue of secession, with a significant number of Confederate sympathizers among the population. The James family, who had been slave owners for many years, had close ties to the South, which shaped their allegiance during the conflict. Frank joined the Missouri State Guard on May 4, 1861, fighting for the cause of the Confederacy. In 1862, Dr. Archie Reuben Samuel, Zerelda's third husband, had an illegitimate child with one of their slaves, who was raised as part of the Samuel family. Meanwhile, Frank fought in the Battle of Lexington, which was a major National Guard victory. In the battle, an estimated 1,774 Confederates were killed, and Confederates took control of southwestern Missouri in October 1861. Frank James and Cole Younger were among William Clark Quantrill's partisan Missouri Rangers, who were supporters of Confederate guerrilla tactics. While there is no evidence that Jesse James joined the murder group, he later bragged about it. In August 1863, Quantrill led a group of about 300 men, including Frank and Cole, in a raid on Lawrence, Kansas. The raid became known as the Lawrence Massacre, and in addition to the smoldering rubble, 180 people were killed. Just 3 months after the Lawrence raid, a group of Union soldiers invaded Samuel Ranch in search of information on the location of Camp Quantrill. Jesse James, then 15 years old, was questioned and beaten when he refused to answer questions from soldiers. Dr. Samuel, who also denied knowing the location of the bandits' camp, was dragged from his home and hanged several times from a tree in the yard. The doctor survived the interrogation, and out of hatred and anger over the event, Jesse joined the guerrillas. Jesse was 16 years old when he was recruited by Bill Anderson, also known as Bloody Bill, a Quantrill lieutenant who had commanded a raid on Centralia, Missouri, on September 27, 1864. More than 100 armed guerrillas have landed in Centralia, a community of less than 100 people, with the intention of robbing ships. While waiting for the train, they terrorized local civilians, robbed them, burned shops and killed civilians. When the train finally arrived, 24 unarmed and wounded Confederate soldiers were dragged away and murdered right in front of them. The guerrillas set fire to Centralia's warehouse, looting and setting the train on fire, and set it off without a crew on board, causing it to then collide, causing a massive explosion. Experienced Confederate infantry, commanded by Confederate Major Avenue Johnson, followed the guerrilla group. About 3 miles south of Centralia, Missouri, Union forces were attacked by the band, and more than 120 Union troops were killed. Only 3 of the guerrilla forces were reported killed in the battle. Frank and Jesse James were part of the battle south of Centralia, although there is controversy over whether they were involved in the massacre of unarmed soldiers earlier in the day. Jesse is said to have killed Major Johnson of the Confederacy and is credited with taking the lives of 7 other men on that tragic day. In the late spring of 1865, Jesse rode to Lexington, Missouri carrying a white flag, but he was shot in the chest while attempting to surrender by occupying Union troops. He then went to Rouleau, Nebraska to recover from his injuries before returning to Missouri. During the Civil War, Missouri was the site of 1,162 battles and skirmishes, a total surpassed only by Virginia and Tennessee. The brutal violence of war took a toll on the state. Although the James family owned many slaves, they were very dark and often let the children sleep in the main house. When the war ended, the former slaves remained on the farm long after they were freed. Frank and Jesse James, who had previously fought in the Confederate Army during the American Civil War, became criminals after the war ended. They claimed that their family had been persecuted in the past, using that as an excuse for their actions. Together with former Confederates and members of the Younger Brothers, they formed a criminal gang and began robbing banks and trains. In particular, Jesse James is motivated by his hatred of the industrial North and sees his outlaw activities as a continuation of the war. The gang began committing crimes in 1866 and continued for the next 15 years, committing numerous robberies throughout the western frontier. The James Younger Gang committed the first bank robbery on February 13, 1866, at the Clay County Savings Association Bank in Liberty, Missouri. It was the first daytime robbery in peacetime, and they made more than $60,000 in cash and bonds. During their escape, gunshots were heard and an innocent 17-year-old boy named George Wymore was killed. The group continued their offense and went on to rob 8 more banks and a box office in Kansas City before robbing their first train. However, their actions often result in injury or loss to innocent bystanders. The Pinkerton Detective Agency has continuously pursued the gang throughout these years. However, the James brothers and their partners have been popularized by journalists and writers, who often describe them as modern-day Robin Hoods. While Jesse James is known for opposing the expropriation of private land by railroad executives for their projects, mostly for personal gain. But in fact, their crimes are very heinous. On December 7, 1869, a gang robbed the Daviess County Savings Bank in Gallatin, Missouri. The dealer, John Sheets, is a former Confederate officer and is believed to be involved in the death of Bill Anderson Bloody. Jesse James shot him in the back of the head, and when Secretary William McDowell ran to the door, he was also shot but survived. The group only made $700 from the robbery. When banks increased security with time-locked vaults in the early 1870s, the gang turned to robbing trains and carriages. They hijacked their first train near Adair, Iowa, on July 21, 1873, causing damage to the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad trains and the death of the train engineer. The gang made $3,000 from the passengers and express. By 1874, Jesse James had become a major issue in the Missouri campaign to crack down on delinquency. Even so, the gang's attacks continued and they remained a notorious criminal group. Robberies continued over the next several years, including a stage robbery in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky, and a bank robbery in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Despite the gang's last train robbery in Glendale, Missouri, on September 7, 1881, Jesse continued to engage in criminal activities. Sometime later, he moved his family to St. Joseph, Missouri and adopted the alias Tom Howard. Z, his wife, tried to convince Jesse to live a normal life and he agreed. Jesse decided to retire and become an ordinary farmer. However, Jesse continues to want to plan the heist with Bob and Charles Ford, whom he has worked with in the past. On April 3, 1882, the Ford brothers visited Jesse's home in St. Joseph to discuss plans for the heist. As Jesse was standing in the chair adjusting the picture, suddenly, Bob Ford from behind shot him just below his right ear, killing him instantly. When he heard the gunshots, Jess's wife Z rushed into the room, doing her best to stop the bleeding. The Ford brothers quickly rushed to the main door and fled. Charles tries to explain to Z that the gun accidentally fired. According to the inference of many historians, Bob Ford had 2 reasons for killing Jesse James. First, he killed a man named Wood Hite in January 1882, and in exchange for a pardon for Hite's murder, Governor Thomas T. Crittenden ordered Bob Ford to kill James. Second, there's a $10,000 reward for Jess's head that Ford hopes to collect. After Jess's death, his body was taken by train to Kearney, where he was put on display. Many friends and admirers came to offer their condolences in front of his body. He was later buried on the family farm near his home, and his tombstone reads, "In loving memory of my beloved son, murdered by a traitor and coward whose name is not worthy to appear here." Please like and share if you find the video content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment below, so as not to miss the upcoming interesting videos. Thanks for watching.